Everybody, so at long last I'm finally doing some video demos, and I typically do these for my students, but I've been meaning to do some additional ones just to post on YouTube, and I will continue to do so. Today what we're going to start off with is doing a thumbnail. You can see what I'm right now already. Work on a character sketch from thumbnail to line drawing. Okay, not to be confused with actually doing concept design. Okay, that's not what I'm doing here, but purely just the stages of how I approach a drawing, and just to flesh out and explain, especially to those who are learning to draw, just the process and how you go about it. So what you see me doing here is what's called a thumbnail stage, and traditionally it's called that because of the size. When you're drawing pencil and paper, these are actually be quite small, and be the size of your thumb. And although I'm doing this digitally, the same kind of idea carries forward. And thumbnail is essentially it's something that is a quick and not too detailed, but mainly just to get the gist of the flow of the character's pose and things like that. I'm going a little farther than that in this case. Always starting off with the head as a sphere, and you see the center line down the head, and the horizontal line, it represents the eyebrow line or the eye line, so you already can kind of tell the perspective of the face. And here we have some. I'm kind of doing two things here. I'm showing some general lines of the direction and flow of the poses, but as well as fleshing out a little bit of the volume, a little bit of the geometry. And in this case, I'll do several poses and then kind of pick the best one. Normally I'll do much more than that actually, and really tweak until I get the pose just right. But for the purpose of this demo, it's just to give you a general idea and at least show a few thumbnails and work from there. So here we have another pose, and you get some sense of, again, the geometry here. And when you break it down, when you look at anything in life, in the world around you, they can be brought down to basic shapes of cone, cylinder, trapezoid, or cube. Okay, so this is the second thumbnail, and I think I end up doing one more and then proceed to just choose the third thumbnail and progress that towards sketch. So same process. Again, just some gestures, very quick. The idea here is to stay very loose, okay, and not to be too committed to a certain line. A lot of times when people draw, the problem is they get so fixated on trying to get into the detail right away. What ends up happening is your drawing gets really stiff. Or you're in that situation where you sketch something, and as soon as you start to clean it up, it doesn't seem as alive or as energetic as the original rough. And it's most likely because it's from stiffening up and concentrating on one area, whereas when you're just doing a quick sketch, you're doing all areas of the drawing equal attention. Okay, you're not just sticking to the head or just sticking to the hand. You're going all over the whole body very quickly, and that gives you a bigger perspective, or better perspective of the bigger picture, literally and figuratively, in terms of what you're drawing. And you want to avoid what I call tunnel vision, in that you just focus on one area or one detail. Even when you do a finished painting, you want to be careful that you don't do that. And all artists will kind of succumb to that a little bit, myself included, but you got to be careful not to do that. So here I've done this thumbnail, and I've decided to continue with it. So what you've noticed, the nice thing about Photoshop makes things a little handy that way, is I reduced the opacity of the thumbnail, so it's a little bit fainter, and so I can use it as a guide, but not be so muddled when I start doing this cleaner line here. And even with traditional pencil and paper, the same idea is, it's just you make sure your sketch is lighter, or and what you commonly do with animation circles, and I used to do this for quite a few years, was use blue line pencil. Okay, and the thumbnails and the sketches would all be blue line, and then when I want to clean it up, then that's when I break out the graphite or the black lead. And so what ends up happening is the black line will stand out against the blue line, and then when you scan it in, put it in Photoshop, you can use the hue saturation mode and turn down the blue, and it basically disappears, and all you have left is the pencil line. So in this case, I'm still doing a traditional approach, and not to be confused traditional versus digital, but what I mean is, even though I'm using Photoshop, it's still the same idea. I'm approaching it as if it's a pencil sketch, and in this case just using a digital brush. In future demos I'll do other techniques, and specifically in coming up with concepts, but this first one is pretty much more of a traditional, how do I go from thumbnail to line drawing and drawing a character. So you can see here, because I have the previous thumbnail and some of the geometry, that makes it a lot easier to tighten things up as opposed to going straight into this. In some cases you watch artists and they won't seem to have any kind of thumbnail. They'll go straight into the drawing like this, and I'll do that sometimes as well. But the only difference is it's still in our head. We're still planning it out. It may be because you're so familiar with what you're drawing or so used to it that you're able to skip a stage, but it's never something where the reason the artists can just do that is because of practice, or they've drawn the same or similar subject matter over and over. The only difference is that the planning stage is just in our head, but it's still there. We're still thinking of the shapes and the geometry and all that. Okay, and so again, the nice thing about Photoshop here is I'm tweaking some things, like maybe the length of the limbs or the position of the shoulder. And even with this, in this particular case, it's fairly exaggerated, right? This character is pretty lanky and long, and another kind of misnomer that you hear sometimes from younger people or from students is that, well, I don't need to know anatomy because my style is very stylized and simple. For example, like Bruce Timm, who does the Batman animated series and Justice League, all those long line of DC animated series that he's responsible for, or at least part of the production. But just because the style is a lot simpler, it doesn't mean they didn't know anatomy. If anything, it's actually a lot more difficult to do well, because you're trying to capture implied muscles and scale and proportion through less lines, and you really have to have a good understanding of anatomy to even do that. So that's not an excuse if you say, oh, I'm going to do something simple and stylized, I don't need to know the anatomy well. That's the exact opposite, okay? And I'll probably talk a little bit more about that as it relates to finding your style in a future vlog. But for now, let's get back to the demo. And so here you've seen I've kind of cleaned things up, and it's still pretty loose and rough, but of course it's starting to get fleshed out at least. So you see going beyond the thumbnail. And in this case, you see I'm doing it in 3 stages, and typically I'll do it either 2 or 3. So this is kind of a third stage where I went from the thumbnail to a somewhat more detailed line, and then I've cleaned it up, or another stage in refining it. Sometimes I'll do it in 2 stages, sometimes in 3. In this case, I'm kind of combining that with actually adding clothing and details. And one thing I always stress is that even if you have a character that's completely covered or has baggy clothing or thick armor, you still need the body behind it. Why? The reason is so you know where everything is falling, because whether it's realistic or stylized, there's still gravity, and clothing and things fall on the body a certain way due to gravity and positioning. So this way there's no guesswork. A lot of times the common mistake is when people drawing characters is some things will look a little off, like especially if they're doing clothing or armors, like one shoulder is a little higher, or one pant leg is a little longer, or too much to the right or to the left. And a little bit of that seems like not too big a deal, but over the course of the whole drawing, if you have all these little increments of things being slightly offset, then the drawing becomes less effective and becomes weaker. So in this case, even though he has a fairly skin-tight outfit, this leaves no room or no doubt of where to place things because I have the general body behind everything. So I always do this for all my drawings, is to maintain that consistency and believability between what the body is there and whatever outfit they're wearing. Now this is pretty much on the fly, okay? And again, I want to stress this isn't necessarily concept design. It could be the process, one aspect or beginning aspect of it, but in this case, because I'm only doing one character, one drawing, it's really just to show again the process of drawing a character from thumbnail to clean line drawing. So what you've noticed here is I've put a mask layer on the body, and so this, now that I have the outfit, I'm just masking or erasing some of the body lines so they don't conflict with the look of the armor and things like that. You could just simply erase it, but I like to mask because what happens is, if you're not familiar, what ends up happening is you can, with masking, you can erase a line, but if you turn off the mask layer, the artwork is also actually still there. You've only hidden it on the mask, not on the actual artwork itself. Okay, so that's the difference. So if you put on a mask and you erase on the mask layer, it looks like you're erasing the line. But if I were to turn off the masking, which I probably should have shown for those who are not familiar with it, you'll notice that all the lines are actually still there. Okay, so this adds another level of control and that kind of thing. And in this case, you saw me, I grouped those layers all into one folder to keep it clean. Some people use a lot of layers, some people don't. Me, it just really depends on the work I'm doing at that time. If I'm doing something like speed painting or any kind of finished painting or something like that, I tend to not use very many layers. I actually tend to just bring it down to one layer, and most digital artists and concept artists will do that. For one, it's to keep the file size smaller, but also it's to keep a closer relationship with a traditional painting where you don't have all these layers to work with. If you make a mistake, you just paint over it. Whereas in this case, if I'm planning something out, or maybe I want to do a template kind of thing, and you could use the same character I'm doing here and do several different designs over it, well, I'll probably keep different layers, because that way you have the main body as one layer, and then you can just do additional layers on top of it to show various outfits and things like that. It's almost like a paper cutout or paper doll kind of thing. So the last thing you see, I'm just doing just an extra little quick tone stage here, and this, it's up to you whether you want to do that. In this case, because it's still loose, still a sketch, I'm not going too detailed with it. It's very quick and loose and rough, even with the tones. And the tones are just adding an extra little dimension of information and depth to the character. All in all, this took maybe half hour. I was kind of taking my, sort of taking my time, sort of not. Going something between, just so you guys can see what I'm doing. And I've sped this up just double time, so it ends up being about just under 15 minutes. So I sped it up maybe just by twice. But there you go. And so hopefully that gives you guys some idea on how to work. And I'll keep doing some more demos in the future, and I'll be very specific as to why I'm doing it and at what stage. Okay, so thanks for watching. Take care. Bye bye.